Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed, the Professor Kenneth Amechi joins us now. He is the Chairman, Sustainable Finance, European University Institute. Lawrence is also Chief Economic Advisor to Imo State Government. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Morning, and thanks for having me.
Well, we're focusing on states today in terms of performance, what should be, what the reality is, probably why. So probably you might have some insight. But we do remember that last government, one of the ministers of budget and planning, I think, did categorically say that we should lay the blame of rising cases of poverty on states because they were not contributing their quota, the developmental quota to the country. That was not too long after the report by the MBS over about 133 million Nigerians being multidimensionally poor. And so, yes, we focus on at the center for a number of things, but the states of huge importance as well. So if we could start with that, in terms of having been in an advisory capacity, and if you could just probably start on a broad-based perspective in terms of how states perform. Are there things that we're missing? Or first of all, do you think they're doing enough in the first instance?
I think that's an interesting question, and I would argue that development should be every person's concern, to both the federal government, state government, and even local government, if you put it that way. So the states, of course, have a role to play because they are closer to the people. And what happens is that as the farther away you are from government, the more one might also be disenchanted. So states are closer, local governments are even closer to people. So I think, yes, I agree that they have a role to play in development.
Well, from what you're seeing, are they pulling their weight?
It depends. If you think about Lagos, for example, there was a time Lagos had some issues with the federal government, and it's called Lagos to perform or become what it is today to a large extent. You also see states like Kaduna or Edo State of late also doing similar things. And of course, I won't rule out Imo State in terms of what we are doing, but I think we'll come to that if we want to explore. But I think different states are at different levels of engagement, but also depends on leadership of these different states.
So now that, how come, do you agree with the statement at the time that, for instance, if we could bring it to our present reality, yes, the government says 5 billion will go to some of these states, but at the moment 2 billion has gone in there. And different states say they are utilizing that funds differently. So being someone who is in sustainable finance, did you, and I know you work with a lot of templates so you can see results. So first, again, broad-based before we'll see how we can zero down. From the method that the states are using to administer these funds and their programs or whatever platform they use, do you think that is sustainable?
I think the money was kind of described as a palliative. Right? Mm-hmm. So if you put it that way, in the long term, it's not sustainable. I would see it more as a short-term measure, but it's not the only instrument. There are other plans I've heard that the federal government wants to put in place. So if we take this in isolation, it may not give us the entire picture. But I would rather situate it in terms of its peculiarities. But the good thing about it, if you ask me, is that the money is in the economy. So whether some people might want to go into infrastructure, some people might want to do cash transfer, some people may want to support small businesses. They have reasons because it's about the peculiarities of their context.
But, pardon me, at what point can we say it's in the economy? If the states are not utilizing proper data, ensuring that it gets to the right people, if certain people are lining their pockets, if I assume that's the case because we haven't seen templates, can we then say it's still in the economy?
I mean, the money is in the economy in the sense that it is spent in Nigeria. You talk about leakages when it comes to some of the policies. Assuming the money is distributed and then it escapes the country, then it's not in the economy. But you can also say, well, the money is there, but it's lying somewhere in the bank. I mean, you also expect the bank to use it. So that's what I mean by it is in the economy. So if you see the economy as a system, okay, then the money is in there. But then the question is, are there efficient or better ways of making the money work better for the system? And I think that is a different question.
But the reason why it was given is to ensure that it gets to people. Yes, it's a short-term measure, but if people, because we here have tried to see, look, do we even have the proper data for them to utilize this? Because that's, I stand corrected, that's what they can use for planning.
Data, I will tell you for free, is a big problem in Africa. And a lot of people have written about it. So it's not something peculiar to Nigeria. But that's not an excuse. We should have proper data. Data is important for development.
Why is it a problem, though?
It can be it can be attributed to many reasons. One, data in itself can be political, right? Think about population. And how, if you know your population and is well captured, it might also change some things, and people might see that as a very political space to be in. It could also be a function of capacity, capability. We rely on the federal civil service or state apparatus, but sometimes these states don't have the capacity to deliver the kind of data you want. It might also be a function of technology. Think about the big data revolution. To what extent are we leveraging on our technologies? But also, data is not just about the government. Data is also about people. There is movement now called citizenship-led data. And think about our corporation. Do you know the amount of data telecom firms have? To what extent are we integrating that data with the government in order to make better decisions? So you see, data shouldn't be seen only as the responsibility of the government. Although the government has to oversee or has that responsibility to ensure that data in the country or for the country is used appropriately for decision making. But there are different sources through which you can get that data. And I believe if we bring the private sector closer, we may learn a lot from them and use the data for better policy making.
Well, in your work as Chief Economic Advisor, because right now I don't imagine that you are giving your advice from up in the air or theorizing. You have been in Imo State, where it is that you have some practical, hands-on experience in terms of the challenges that faces government from theory to execution. I would like you to share a few of them. Apart from data, I think you've highlighted data and also the issue of capacity. I've heard that. In fact, as a matter of fact, I wrote that down before now, in terms of assessing the capacity of leaders transiting from their campaigns to actually delivering on the ground and through the systems that they also have on the ground to help achieve some of the things that they have. So what would you say has been some of the greatest obstacles, when you look at what economic theories and actually implementing things on the ground?
Before I go to the challenges, you talked about the data we have, right? So I wouldn't say we are starting from ground zero. So it will also be discrediting the National Bureau of Statistics and even the State Bureau of Statistics. There are some data out there. Say, for example, we know the cost of fuel today. We know what it takes, food basket, for example. But also we know that unemployment is high, especially youth unemployment. We can't, even if we don't have the data, we feel it. It's all around us. So there is a data that says that Imo State has a significant number of unemployed people in Nigeria. And that's because Imo State has become a victim of our own success, because a lot of graduates, Imo State graduates a lot of people, but Imo State cannot absorb all of them. So you see people moving to Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt looking for jobs. So that's why the government came up with the idea of training 300,000 people in digital skills, because with that, you have people that will be self-employed at least. So they are not looking for jobs, and they can stay in Imo State and work for companies abroad. So, and also, abroad here doesn't necessarily mean, it's not exclusive that you have to travel abroad, but you can also work for companies in Lagos. It's cheaper to be an IT person in Owerri than being in Lagos, because you can provide affordable services. So that's it on one hand. But if you look at the multiplier effect of the 300,000 people, assuming you take a multiplier effect in the sense of one person has impact on two people, for example. So you're already looking at about 900,000 people. But the data we have says about over 1 million people are unemployed in Imo State. So that single project in itself can unleash a lot in a way that will address unemployment. But beyond that, we also recognize that not every person will be interested in digital technology. So the government has also come up with what is called One Kindred one business initiative. It is about putting groups together to work, and you can use your old cooperative, but it does not necessarily mean a cooperative. So imagine a village, and this is based on the Igbo social structure of Umunna, because they go home, Christmas is coming around. People will spend money investing or building town halls that can be used maybe once or twice a year. They donate to churches. I don't have anything against the churches. But why can't we come together and create economic, productive entities? Since we can already show that sense of communal existence. And that's the One Kindred, One Business initiative. And Imo State is looking at creating about 5,000 of them in the next few years.
Producing what precisely?
Sorry?
Producing what? What areas will you be encouraging those businesses to be looking at?
So at the moment, the state is not dictating for them, but it's also for them to look at their core competencies. Say, for example, they can go into poultry farming. How much does it cost to start a 300-bird poultry? It may not be up to 10 million naira. And the kindreds can raise that money to do that.
Is it just political?
No, it's not political. Because this thing started back in January, right? And it's not political. We would have held a summit tomorrow, actually. But we moved it because we don't want it to be politicized. So let the elections come and go, and hopefully the governor will be re-elected, and it continues. So there's nothing political about it, and it's speaking to everyone. It's not party-based. And the good thing to mention here is that the government is not investing at the moment. So that you need to have a skin in the game. And why the government is taking that position is that you don't want a situation whereby you say there is money, and then it's politicized. And
what's the yardstick for selecting the people who are qualified?
The yardstick is that there are 4 criteria. 1, it has to be a group-owned business, right? 2, it has to be focused on employment creation. 3, it has to be profit-oriented. This is not charity. And 4, it has to be domiciled in Imo State. And the 5th one is that it has to be registered. So it's a way of addressing informality. So we use the PI. It has to address poverty, it has to address informality, and it has to address employment challenges. That's the PIE kind of acronym there.
But pardon me, but isn't this tantamount to reinventing the wheel? Because I heard several residents there say there's a template already that former leader there, Sambakwe, had. Every local government area, there's an industry there, and that was hugely significant and sustainable and successful at the time. I need to just replicate it.
Well, this is not completely new. You can also say there is one thing the federal ministry, I think is the Nigeria Export Promotion Council, also has one local government, one product. That is the OLOP. But a product is not a business. So that's the difference between what Imo State is doing here, which is new. Because it can have a product, the product is a commodity. But if you build a business around it, and this business doesn't necessarily need to be commodity-based. I gave you the example of poultry. Do you know that the poultry products consumed in Imo State, you say Imo State is the hospitality capital of the Southeast at least, but you find out that Imo people are not able to produce enough to satisfy this industry. And this industry sometimes imports goods from outside Imo State. So that in itself will drive demand. And it's not about one local government, one product per se, but like I said, it's about business. And you talked about Sambakwe. Sambakwe, I've challenged people to show me the industrial policy of Sambakwe. I haven't found it yet, but he did great. So the government also, last year, November 2nd, launched an industrial policy, which is guiding what we are doing at the moment. So we just had a 1-year review of it. And the digital economy came top on that industrial policy, as well as the agribusiness agenda, which we are now trying to champion with the One Kindred, One Business initiative.
It is interesting. I think that digital trading thingy must have been, I don't want to say misrepresented, or maybe it's how the governor also represented it in the media. I don't know if you saw the articles that came up on the heels of him trying to campaign with that. And how youths were very ecstatic. It was as if he was promising them visas and saying that he was going to ship them abroad and, find jobs for them abroad. And the media, of course, picked up on that. And there was, very heavy criticism because he didn't explain it like this. This was not how he explained it. So would you say that the governor also understands what he's saying and he's transmitting same correctly to the people?
Of course, the governor understands it, and the digital skill program was approved by ESCO. So it wasn't as if it was made up on the hoof. No. So, and I mean, there is also the sense that things can be read out of context. But you also think about how you take a bad story or a crisis and it becomes something positive. And I would say to a large extent, probably was a crisis, but that crisis has also helped a lot of people in Nigeria to know what
you saw the controversy. Did you see it?
I saw. I mean, I was not in the country at the time, but I followed most of those things online. It was controversial, but also the commissioner in charge, I guess, was on a rise, and to explain things together with the chief political advisor to the governor, and I thought they did a very good job by presenting things in a much more balanced perspective. So this is election time. Anything can happen. People can take things out of context to make some kind of a political capital out of it. But one thing I know for sure is that the digital skill is a well thought out program, and the commissioner, the people in charge are pushing it. As of today, they are launching the third cohort, and I think they're looking at about 40,000 people. So if you go to Owerri today, 10 a.m., the governor will be there to launch it. But maybe the media is not picking up on that. Hopefully they do, so that this can be seen as something that is not just political in itself.
It'll be very interesting. You've talked about how, okay, I understand that my colleague Ayo has questions for you.
Well,
over to you.
Thank you, Mokwe. Prof, I just wanted to, something that you were discussing with my colleagues right there earlier, about sustainable finance. I think that's one of the first few questions Chamberlain asked you. You would agree with me that at the heart of sustainable finance are the interaction of economic, social, and environmental issues with finance. How well would you say states are doing or able to do in that regard? I know you may want to give the example of Imo State, but what are the drop-downs? What are the challenges? Markwe asked you about that, but in terms of this interaction of economic, social, and environmental issues with finance, how well are we doing, in your own opinion?
I think that's a very good question, but it's not something limited to Imo State. I do a lot of work with the banks in Nigeria and also abroad. And I sit on the European Commission's Committee on Sustainable Finance for Emerging Markets. So the point there about sustainable finance, as you have articulated, is the integration of economic issues, environmental issues, and even governance issues. So it's not limited to Nigeria or Imo State, as I've said. Well, you find that, I mean, Nigeria, for example, we have the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, which is led by the CBN, and the banks are following to a large extent. You also have organizations like SEC, pushing issues around companies that are quoted to pay attention to their environmental issues as well. But are we where we should be comfortable with? No, I don't think so. Some people have said that this is a journey. One of the also problems in terms of the global aspect of sustainable finance, especially if you're looking at it from the global north, and here I'm looking at developed economies, sustainable finance is simply climate finance, and it's something we need to move away from if we want to also have that global south perspective to it. Because I will argue that unemployment is a big problem in Africa. Like I said, about 60% of African youth are unemployed. So sustainable finance is also about addressing social sustainability issues. And if we look at our development from our own perspective, it will also give us that coloration that will help us address some of these challenges. I talked about the Imo State industrial policy, which was launched last year. And we took this into consideration. We prioritize areas that will contribute to jobs. So we don't want to bring in big companies that will just make money and create very little jobs. So people always talk about, oh, how much foreign direct investment have you brought in? So that's not the question for me. The question is, what sort of investors do we need? We need investors that will come in to address our problems, make money from that, but also investors that will grow with us.
Prof.
Meet us where we are and grow with us. But if they come with only their agendas and they're only interested in themselves, I think that's not the sort of investors that will work for Nigeria or Imo State and even for
on
Africa
that, at the end of the day, and from most of the things that you've said this morning, it's always about the people. But the question that I'd like to ask you is, how effectively would you say governments, especially state governments, are able to communicate their intentions to the people, to the point that the people will take ownership of it. Because it would seem like most of the time when we talk about these things, the people are on one side, the government is just doing what it wants. So do you see government officials or government at all being effective in their communication to the people to the point that they can own whatever government policies are coming out?
From my experience doing this job now, I want to mention that I do it on part-time basis as well as on a pro bono basis. The government doesn't pay me. So I've done it now for like 20 months. One thing I've learned, it wasn't a surprise, so to speak, is that there is what I may call trust deficit between the people and the government. And so the question you're raising now is a very important one, because when you go out there and promote some of these policies or practices, like say, for example, the One Kindred, One Business initiative, people are always doubtful. Are you on the side of government? We don't want to get involved. And then you try to tell them, this is not about government. If you set up a poultry business in your community, how would that become a government's problem? Even if this government serves its term and it's not in the office, how does it affect this? So that trust deficit in itself is a problem. But the paradox there is that we also think the government we do not like, we do not trust, should save us. And that for me is paradoxical. So that's why I keep telling people that it's not about government per se, but also what we can do for ourselves. And I see governance as a collaborative endeavor. It's not something we should just leave to governments to do. People should be involved at all levels, and also corporations. So again, in Imo State, we set up what we call Corporate Imo Impact Partnership. So there we brought in companies, not in any kind of contractual arrangement, but we brought in companies to look at what Imo State is doing and how they can contribute to the development, because companies or the private sector should be seen as an equal partner in the development journey. But in Nigeria and many African countries, companies are treated as second class when it comes to development, and they're not given the sort of responsibility that will make that work.
All right. I know you have some tight schedule, so I'm sure that at some point, probably later, we'll have an expansive session and break down those figures and see whether or not those policies are impacting the figures. So that's one area that we'll project in the days ahead. But we do thank you for coming on, and we wish you all the best. Professor Kenneth Amechi, Chairman, Sustainable Finance, European University Institute Florence, and also Chief Economic Advisor to Imo State Government. And we hope they'll have peaceful elections this time.
We pray so. Thank you very much.
We're back in just a moment, everyone. Stay on with us.